Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Zhuge Liang Northern Expedition lore series as we continue with episode 8, titled A Proper Retreat. Now, in our last episode, we ended as Zhuge Liang started his siege of Chencang, previously believing that this fortification would be easily taken as it would have been neglected for decades. But Zhuge Liang soon realized his mistake, as Cao Zhen astutely predicted this attack route immediately following the conclusion of the first northern expedition, and this meant that General Hao Zhao had the time and the manpower to strengthen the fortifications at Chencang for a month before Zhuge Liang's arrival, as Zhuge Liang's first two siege attempts of using cloud ladders and rams, followed by mobile arrow towers, were both beaten back by a well-stocked and prepared defenders at Chencang. However, not willing to give up, Zhuge Liang would change his tactics once again, as he would first try to use his mobile arrow towers once again to simply provide some cover fire to allow troops to safely close the gap to the moat, protecting sections of the fortification, as Zhuge Liang wanted to try to fill in these small moats to allow for more options to assault the fortification. But sadly, when Hao Zhang moved his defenders back to the taller palisades to fire arrows down at the Shu Han troops trying to fill in the moat, Zhuge Liang had to quickly abandon this plan as well. Then in a last-ditch effort, Zhuge Liang ordered his troops to start digging tunnels to reach inside Chencang. But once again, Hao Zhao was even more prepared, as he had already had defensive trenches dug all along the fort walls to intercept any tunnel attempts from coming inside. So, having exhausted all the possible assault options, Zhuge Liang had to make a decision, as their own food supplies were starting to run low, as the second expedition followed immediately after the first one, without a long period of time to prepare and stockpile additional supplies. And with the siege having already gone on for over 20-something days, the Wei reinforcements, led by Cao Zhen, must already be on their way, as it takes roughly 15 days for news to reach the Wei Imperial Court in Luoyang, and definitely even shorter to reach Chang'an, where Cao Zhen now reigns. So Zhuge Liang came to the only logical decision left, as he would order the Shu Han army to retreat back into the Chencang path, as the second northern expeditions will start and end at Chencang. Now, fortunately, this retreat will be much more organized and orderly when compared to the mishaps during the first northern expedition following the sudden and tragic defeat at Jieting. Not only will Shu Han not suffer any additional losses during this retreat, Zhuge Liang even had the time to lay a rearguard ambush as he awaited the Wei reinforcement to over-pursue. And sure enough, once the vanguard Wei reinforcements under the command of Wang Shuang would arrive at Chencang, and hear that the Shu Han army were forced to retreat ahead of time due to a supply shortage, Wang Shuang decided to lead his cavalry forces immediately into the Chencang path, hoping to score himself an easy victory targeting the retreating Shu Han army, especially since the heavy supplies were probably at the end of the retreating army. But what awaited him was a well-organized ambush by Zhuge Liang's rearguard, as Wang Shuang gifted Zhuge Liang a small victory at the end of this brief and rather disappointing second northern expedition, as Wang Shuang's entire vanguard cavalry unit would end up being decimated alongside Wang Shuang himself, who was slayed in the first wave after blindly charging headfirst into the ambush. And with Wang Shuang's fate sealed, Cao Zhen would halt all pursuing Wei forces, as both sides were content retreating back to their prior positions, bringing an end to a fruitless and brief second northern expedition. But much like the first one, Zhuge Liang chose not to retreat all the way back to Chengdu, as the army once again remained within Hanzhong, looking for their next opportunity. And that opportunity would indeed come right away, as after having failed on the Chencang path with the full might of the entire Shu Han army, Zhuge Liang decided to give the Mount Qi path one more try. But this time, instead of trying to make huge gains with the entire army, Zhuge Liang decided to only send a small army under the command of General Chen Shi to target the commanderies of Wudu and Yingping that made up the southwestern borders of the Kingdom of Wei. Now, Zhuge Liang targeted these two commanderies mainly for their strategic locations, as the Wudu commandery occupied much of the Mount Qi path. While sparsely populated and not rich with fertile land or resources, Wudu still had tremendous value as the perfect springboard for the Shu Han army in any future northern expeditions when using the Mount Qi path, as it would shorten their supply routes and put their starting location much closer to Mount Qi Castle. Meanwhile, Yingping commandery, while also sparsely populated and poor in resources, was a critically important piece to the safety of the Kingdom of Shu Han, as there exists a Yingping path located inside this commandery that offered a viable route for the Wei army to bypass the gate pass at Jianmen that guarded the Shu Han front door. And up until now, because the Kingdom of Wei had never focused on their western front, the value of both of these commanderies have been largely ignored, especially with Cao Cao sapping the population of these border commanderies with his forced migration policies. But Zhuge Liang feared that it would be just a matter of time before the Wei forces would seize upon these potential advantages, especially given the frequency of his northern expeditions. In addition, while both of these commanderies were sparsely populated with Han citizens, they were teeming with Qiang and Di nomadic tribes, and Zhuge Liang hoped that by taking these commanderies, he could start rebuilding that relationship with these nomadic groups and levy troops from them in the future. So with these goals set, Chen Shi and his small army were dispatched from Hanzhong in spring of 229, just a few months after the end of the siege of Chencang, and this would kick off the Third Northern Expedition. In terms of timing, Zhuge Liang hoped to catch the Wei forces off guard, as no one would expect another attack so soon, especially given that the Shu Han forces voluntarily retreated from the previous northern expedition due to a shortage of supply, which is another reason why committing Chen Shi and this smaller army suited Zhuge Liang, as there would not be a huge supply investment for this particular northern expedition, even after they were able to restock back in Hanzhong. In addition, by picking the cold spring month, Zhuge Liang hoped, much like in his first northern expedition, that the Yong province prefect, Guo Huai, would be a Wei. But unfortunately, much like the first northern expedition, Guo Huai would remain vigilant, as he would actually never leave the Yong province for the rest of his life, as he would end up receiving countless promotions and raises from the Kingdom of Wei from now until his death in 255, for his roles in repelling the Shu Han attacks from Zhuge Liang to Jiang Wei. But ultimately, regardless of his official title, which went as high as Grand General, he would always remain the prefect of the Yong province, where he would remain a steward defender on the western front against the Kingdom of Shu Han. So, when news of Chen Shi's attack on Wudu and Yingping commanderies reached Guo Huai, he immediately rallied the garrison troops of the Yong province and marched down the Mount Qi path to answer the Shu Han aggression. And with that, our episode here comes to an end, as we'll continue next time to see how Zhuge Liang would respond to yet another surprise appearance by Guo Huai, and how the Shu Han forces finally would make some material gains during this third northern expedition. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, enough to hit that like button to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!